What is going on, everyone? Today I'm going to be giving you my non-spoiler review for M3GAN 2.0. This is a film that I honestly wasn't looking forward to all that much until the first trailer released for it, because I enjoyed the first one, but I didn't really love it. I didn't really see any potential for a sequel, but that trailer kind of proved me wrong. It showed that you can go in a really different direction with this franchise, and you can actually do something kind of interesting with it. And in that case, they are going in a completely different genre of film. It is not a horror movie anymore. It is now an action comedy. The trailer was very clear about that, so anybody going into this movie expecting a horror film is probably someone who didn't see the trailer, because yes, the trailer was pretty clear in what it was trying to be. And so I was immediately excited for it because I actually thought it looked pretty good. It looked fun, it looked ridiculous, and therefore I was looking forward to it. And did it deliver? Let's talk about that in this video. We're gonna go through the positives, the negatives, and then I'm gonna give the movie a rating out of 10. Let's get right to it. Starting off with the positives, I thought it delivered most of what I was expecting out of this movie. It is a fun, silly, campy action comedy sequel to a horror film. That's exactly what it feels like all the way through. It's very much tonally consistent with what it's trying to do. I was totally expecting it to be the way it was, and it delivered. I'm definitely very happy that they ended up doing this with the sequel, because like I said, you could have done something very boring with the sequel. You could have just made it another movie just like the first one, where M3GAN's killing more people and just, killing other people, I guess. But no, they made it in a way to where the setup is that they need M3GAN to help them with this big mission against this other robot named Amelia. And I love that concept. It's obviously very similar to how Terminator 2 was a sequel to the first Terminator film, where the first Terminator film felt more like a horror film and the second one went further into the action territory. But I would say this is obviously a bit different because it's all comedic, right? It's way more comedic than the first one was. I wouldn't say to a large degree, because I do think the first one was comedic and campy, but this one, it just dials it up to 1,000. And it makes sense that they would do that, because when people went to go see that first film, what did they like about it? They didn't come out of that movie saying, oh, it was great horror, great tension, it was so scary. Like, nobody was saying that. They were just saying that it's kind of funny and it's got some campy moments, and especially like teenagers were just absolutely loving this M3GAN character. So you might as well just crank that aspect up to 1,000. That's exactly what this movie gives you. And M3GAN herself in this is pretty good. She's fun to watch. She has a lot of funny moments, a lot of funny dialogue, a couple of moments that honestly were like interesting story-wise. Like, they actually gave her development as a character, which I wasn't really expecting that much of that, but they did that. They actually made her feel really human, and I appreciated that. And I think a lot of other people might appreciate that as well. People wanted more of a story out of this franchise. I do think this movie does give you an interesting connection with this character, especially the bond between her and Gemma. So of course Gemma is the mother, well, I guess she's the aunt, but she of course adopted Katie, and she has a lot more time to spend with M3GAN in this film compared to the first one. Obviously, the first one, it was more so her and Katie. But in this one, there's a lot of back and forth dialogue between Gemma and M3GAN. And a lot of it is actually pretty decent. Like, there's obviously a lot of comedy in there, but even in terms of just developing their bond, there's a lot of good stuff there. Something that I was very surprised by is the action and the choreography is actually pretty decent. That was one aspect I wasn't expecting to be like that good. I was expecting them to kind of, just kind of rush through that a bit, but it actually is pretty cool. There's a lot of good shots, like a lot of stylish, interesting shots that they do with their action scenes, especially towards the end of the film. So it's engaging action. It's not like the best action you've ever seen, not even close, but it's engaging, it's fun, and that's really all I wanted out of this movie. I wanted some stylish, crazy action. It's not realistic whatsoever. It's definitely over the top, but it's stylish, so that's cool. In terms of comedy, I do think most of this movie worked pretty well. Obviously, most of the comedy is in terms of what M3GAN does, what she says. That is 99% of the comedy. Most of the other comedy doesn't really work that well. I feel like a lot of movies do that, where there's a character that is very specifically meant to be the more comedic character of the film, but then they try to also force comedy in other places of the movie. It doesn't work nearly as well as it does with that main part of the movie. So I do think they should have maybe honed down on the comedy in other areas a bit and just made it all about M3GAN. But in general, like I said, M3GAN is hilarious and she has a lot of good lines, a lot of good moments in this movie. So if you wanted more of that, you will get that. Something that I really wasn't expecting is the commentary on AI. Now, of course, the first movie has this a bit, but it was more focused on technology. It was more focused on just overall, like, don't let your kids, spend too much time with that technology when they're growing up. And there's some of that in this movie as well. But they kind of hone in on the conversation of AI as well. And like, there's a lot more, technology in this movie, even more advanced than what we saw in the first film. And obviously, that's a pretty prevalent conversation in today's world. Everyone's talking about AI nowadays. And I do think the movie handles it in an interesting and nuanced way. The through line they have about it towards the end of the film was pretty interesting. Like, it was an interesting stance to have on it for the characters in the movie. So I personally enjoyed that. I think a lot of it will be quite meta for people because, again, it's a very common conversation people are having today, but that kind of makes it work. The last positive I have is the brand new villainous robotic character known as Amelia. She's played by Ivana Sakno, and she did a great job. Like, out of all the performances in this film, I do think her performance as this robot was fantastic. Kind of reminds me of Robert Patrick's portrayal of the T-1000 in Terminator 2. Not in the same level, like obviously his performance is generational, but I do think she did a great job in this movie of being this character that's obviously a robot and kind of appears as human. So a lot of people think she's human when she's actually not. Like, there's even one specific scene where someone's talking to her and they don't even realize that she's a robot. They're just talking to her normally. And there's a lot of interesting like physical humor with like how she's moving and how it's obviously very different because she's a robot, and obviously the way she talks and stuff. So I think all of that was pretty cool, and in general was just a very fun part of this movie. But unfortunately, I do have some negatives. I do not think this is a perfect film whatsoever. The story does feel a bit bloated. I will say, especially towards the end of the movie, there was just way too much going on. There's way too many plot lines, way too many characters, and I'm usually not one to complain about that in movies. I'm usually the last person to complain about that because I personally think the more the better. Like, most of the time, I'm just happy to have a lot of stuff just packed into a movie. More often than not, I'm complaining that a movie doesn't have enough. Like, that's usually what I say. But in this movie, so many of the storylines are not developed enough for them to really warrant existing in this movie. So when you have so much going on and a lot of it isn't developed properly, you kind of feel like some of that should have been trimmed back a bit. I don't necessarily think the movie should have been shorter, but you definitely should have trimmed back some of the fat a bit, maybe added more scenes with M3GAN herself. I mean, M3GAN actually doesn't come into the movie until quite further in than I thought she would. Like, she wasn't in the very beginning of the movie. It took a while for her to show up, and I wasn't really expecting that. But in general, I just feel like there was a lot going on in this movie. And I like I said, I do think it would have helped if they cut it a bit, because I don't think all of it was necessary. There were some characters that I thought were going to get killed off in the beginning of the movie because somehow they were still there at the end. And I was like, well, why is this character still around? They don't really do anything in the movie. They don't have any development. They don't really have much going on. So why keep them around? They're really just used as sometimes just like a character to just be there, and I just think they could have cut some of it. And although I did like a lot of M3GAN's lines in this movie, I do think some of the dialogue overall in this movie wasn't very good. Some of it felt like they were trying to go for like a really, like an iconic line or something, and it just didn't work. Even if it wasn't from M3GAN, sometimes it was from other characters. They felt like they were trying to do a lot with their dialogue in ways that I don't think worked most of the time. And sometimes there was also moments where even the acting didn't feel that good. And I don't really want to go into specifics because I don't think it was necessarily one specific actor. It was more so just like moments between a lot of the actors in this movie where it felt like they were just maybe taking a bad take from this actor. Like, that happens all the time in movies where they obviously do multiple takes, and sometimes they end up just taking a take that ended up just not being the best take that that actor could have possibly have given. Like, you can tell that actor is much better than what that scene presented, but they end up taking that take anyways. So then it makes it kind of look like that actor's not that great. And there's a lot of moments like that in this movie where I was like, that just didn't sound convincing at all. Like, that actor said that with zero emotion whatsoever, and it wasn't a character that was meant to be emotionless. There's one character in this movie that I legit thought was an android this entire film. I thought it was like a secret android character because this person had like zero emotion in their voice. So I was like, is this like a secret android? Maybe they're gonna come out later in the movie and they're gonna be like, oh my god, I've been a robot this whole time. But that didn't happen. So I just was like, well, okay, this person just doesn't have much emotion going on. And I don't know if it's the acting or if it's just the takes that they're showing us. I don't really know, but it's something that I had to bring up nonetheless. And probably my biggest issue with this movie is, even though I said before this movie did deliver on what I was expecting, I do think majority of the best moments of the movie are in the trailer, right? And I always hate that because, especially nowadays with how much trailers show, you always just want more. And if you watch the trailers, it puts you in this position when watching the movie where you're kind of like looking through and you're like, okay, this next scene is probably going to have that one scene from the trailer because that one scene hasn't happened yet. And you're like, okay, the next scene's probably going to be that scene. And you kind of can get like piece it together as you go along. And it doesn't really work that way when the trailers don't show a lot, you know what I mean? So I kind of wish they didn't show everything, but like a lot of the coolest like shots, a lot of the coolest even lines of dialogue, a lot of the best lines, a lot of the best surprises, they were all in the trailer. Like I can't think of any other surprises in this movie where I wasn't like expecting like a scene like that or a character to look like that or whatever. It was all in the trailer. So I definitely recommend not watching the trailer if you haven't seen it yet, because I think the movie would be much better, much more surprising that way. But I felt like every moment, even though it delivered on what it was trying to be, I did feel like, damn, I already saw that in the trailer. I didn't see the whole scene. It was still nice to see the whole scene play out, but it was like this cool moment would have been nice if I didn't know it was going to happen. And just as an example, and if you don't want to be spoiled on this, if you haven't seen the trailer, maybe just skip like 10 seconds. When she was in the wingsuit flying down, like that was a really cool scene. But I was like, I already saw it in that trailer. You know what I mean? It was great in the trailer. The trailer did its job. It got me invested. But like, you got to have at least some surprises for the movie. You can't just throw everything in the trailer and then just kind of be like, okay, well, when you see the movie, you kind of know what you're getting. But like, you got to give me a little more. You know what I mean? So wish they kind of cut back the trailer a bit. It's not really the movie's fault. It's whoever made the trailer's fault. But I mean, you gotta make it so it doesn't show as much, because otherwise the movie's not going to be as satisfying. It might get more people in the seats, but it's not going to be as satisfying when they actually watch the movie. And my last negative is something that it's really hard to hold this against the movie, because I understand why it's this way. It's not really the movie's fault. Like, I get why they're doing it, but I can't shake the feeling that this movie would be so much better if it was R-rated. It definitely would be. Like I mentioned before, the action and the choreography is pretty good, but most of the time, actually pretty much 99% of the time, when a character actually dies, they cut away from it. They cut away from it, have like a blood splatter on the wall or something like that, or they have the character get like impaled and there's just like no blood at all, or they just get killed in a very like non-violent way. You know, they don't do much with that. And I'm not saying the movie needs all of that to be good, but I really do feel like the campiness and the comedy of this movie and just the way M3GAN acts, it would be so much better if you could actually see the people she's killing in the way that she does. I think it would definitely work better. I don't think this is a type of movie that works well being like subtle with that. I know they're not intentionally being subtle. They're doing it because they can. It's a PG-13 movie, but I do think it would be so much better if they just showed it. You know what I mean? And I know for the first film, it was PG-13 and then they did like an R-rated cut later on, but I heard that R-rated cut didn't really show that much more. It was kind of not the best. So I don't know. Maybe they'll do an R-rated cut of this one. I doubt that they will, but I feel like this character just should have been an R-rated movie. It really should have been. They could have done so much more with it if it was, but overall, still really enjoyed it. For a rating, I'm going to give this movie a 7.2 out of 10, which might seem low to some people, but I don't think that's low. I think that's a decent rating. That's me basically saying I enjoyed it. I had a good time, but it's not a movie I would say is like great or anything. I'm not going to sit here and like defend it till the day I die or anything like that. It's a movie that I enjoyed. Maybe I'll watch it again in the future, but I'm not really like that excited to watch it again whenever I end up maybe watching it again. Who knows? Maybe I won't ever watch it again. I don't know. It's not a movie I'm itching to see again, I guess is the best way to put it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I will see you on the next one. Peace out.